All right, everyone. Apparently, Franco is still running Spain, only more ineptly, because I guess anyone in Spain that refuses to take the vaccine, one of the 7 or 8 different vaccines they've got now. Well, I wonder what happens if they offer you the Chinese one. Are you still allowed? They'll be put on a list, and the idea is that there will be, various punitive measures for this. The problem is this. Much like with the lockdowns, and I've pointed this out, the only way in which COVID was going to have its genie put back into the bottle, so to speak, is if the entire world simultaneously made martial law-fed, mandatory full lockdowns for a month or something. It would be heinously authoritarian. It would be illegal under numerous constitutions, especially in the Western world. It would cause mass civil unrest, and you'd end up having to kill a lot of people in order to actually continue the situation, and would cause economic chaos. It would cause depression-like conditions that would last for some months at least, probably longer. It would cause food runs, shortages, and it would fuck everything up. You could feasibly have destroyed COVID by doing that. In fact, you could probably have eliminated other diseases at the same time by breaking all possible chains of transmission. It is impossible physically to do that. Therefore, these half-assed lockdowns, partial lockdowns, quasi-lockdown restrictions, lockdowns in some countries but not others, it doesn't work. The virus is mutating. It's become more transmissible now. By the way, Florida now has cases, and the case was not related to travel history. The new coronavirus, COVID-20, is now out and loose all over the world in the tens of thousands of case totals range, I would estimate. It's not going to be stopped. And it's going to be considerably harder to deal with than COVID-19 because it's considerably more transmissible. Those masks that you're wearing are fundamentally useless in that particular situation. With COVID-19, because it's some people, by the way, I've got to take umbrage with one thing from people that are anti-mask. And I don't wear a mask when I just walk around, and I'm not going to. Droplets and aerosols are not the same thing. When you see these videos where they've got like smoke coming out of the mannequin and it's fuming around, that's not what the mask is meant to protect against. It's mainly droplets through coughing, sneezing, speaking. Still not 100% effective. Still kind of, I'm not necessarily for it, certainly not in the mandatory sense, but it's not quite the same. That being said, with vaccination, you're going to see the same thing. In order to actually establish the kind of herd immunity, a la Fauci, by the way, himself, officially, just so, don't ban me, bro, YouTube, because, this conforms explicitly to the CDC and WHO guidelines. You would need virtually universal vaccination. The problem is, if you look at the rate of people that actually support vaccination for COVID, in some cases, it's barely above 50%. A significant minority of people in this world will not take the vaccine. Like with lockdowns, if you wanted to establish a situation where you could get to at least 95% or something, you'd need to make it mandatory. You would have to use force. There would be resistance. There would be civil unrest. There would be people, preppers and shit, worried about Armageddon, worried about the mark of the beast and stuff like that. You would probably have militias on the move, and not just in the United States. You would have mass protests. You would end up with riots. The cure would be worse than the disease. The number of people that would die in unrest and of starvation and other problems would be higher than the number that would ever die from COVID. By the way, under current conditions, the likelihood is that this disease eventually spawns a mutant that's less lethal. But the good news is that we're forcing it to mutate with some of the restrictions that are forcing it to become more transmissible, but it's also incentivized to become less harmful. Because you're causing symptoms, the person is more visibly sick, they're more likely to get tested, therefore treated, therefore isolated, so the disease can't spread as far. So you're actually incentivizing the disease to become potentially less lethal. That's good, by the way. You're not going to establish that by trying to cause mass civil unrest by mandatory vaccines. And this is a half-assed attempt. This is saying you don't have to get vaccinated, we're just going to take down your name. How are you going to document them all? There's going to be probably 20 million Spaniards that won't get vaccinated. What's the point then? You're far shy of herd immunity. By the time that the natural process of people getting sick and then getting over it and getting, we now know, reasonable resistance against the disease begins to burn it out, you'll have more mutants. Now, it's only a matter of time before it's significantly differentiated enough so that it's a whole different dinosaur and the vaccine's not as effective towards it. In fact, it could be harmful. Like with the Spanish flu, you can get a situation where people with prior exposure end up going into a cytokine storm and you lose 5-10% of your young people. It won't kill the old. Their immune systems are already degraded. It's less common among the elderly. Young, healthy individuals, you lose an entire generation. We'll be pulling the early 1900s all over again. They called it the lost generation explicitly for a reason. First wave of the disease was just basically like the flu. Then it decided in the trenches of World War I or in China or in Kansas, depending on who you ask, it decided to mutate. Well, wonderful. So yeah, putting people on. And then Fauci comes out and says, well, everything's on the table. We might have a COVID vaccination passport. So essentially, even if you've already gotten sick, you have to take the vaccine, you can't even travel. Which is, in my understanding, that'd be unconstitutional, but, the government often does things that aren't constitutional. You might see local mandates for vaccines, state by state, locality by locality. By the way, if I were in the United States physically and the state attempted to force it, I would move to a different state immediately. I would not tolerate it. I won't tolerate authoritarianism in that form. Not out of being anti-vax. I'm pro-vaccine. Yeah, you get the vaccine, you've got a reasonable chance of not getting COVID. Not that that is particularly meaningful. It's not exactly smallpox or yellow fever or something, but it shouldn't be mandatory. And that's why what we're doing right now is basically running around chaotically, and it's completely pointless. We failed with the lockdowns because you either needed to not lock anything down, let it take its course, or you needed a full mandatory, month-long, 3 viral generations long, worldwide lockdown with martial law. That's the only way that it would have been meaningful. The partial half-assing it thing doesn't work. And by the way, if the measures that we're using with the distancing and masks are so great, why is it that nations that have virtually complete compliance on these things are seeing spiking cases? It's because it's more transmissible because we forced it to mutate, dude. We created the problem. Now they're trying to vaccinate it out of existence. It's not going to happen. You are going to fight this disease on an endemic yearly basis. The silver lining is that evolution will take its course. Evolution will make sure that mankind does not get wiped out by a variant of what essentially is the same family of viruses to which the common cold exists. And much like we can't get rid of flu or the common cold, we're not going to be able to wipe COVID off the face of the earth. Not through any efforts that we possibly have, short of genetically manipulating the whole world's population to be immune and doing it in double quick time. That's about all. Peace out.